49 years ago, doesn't change things. The tomb's still empty. Okay. Let's try this again. April 8th, 1966. 49 years ago, the famous Time magazine published what may be the most famous cover in the celebrated history. It consisted of 3 words on a black background, and the words were in red, and it said this: it asked a question, is God dead? Is God dead? That question started a controversy that still continues today in the hearts and minds of many. Even among Christians, they may not ask that question, but in their actions and in their hearts, they seem to portray that sentiment. I'm reminded of the story that I read a number of years ago, and I've shared it in another sermon some time ago about Martin Luther. He went into a period of great distress, and he just felt overwhelmed and felt so discouraged, and life wasn't supposed to be this way. And as a preacher, he didn't know what to do about it. And he ends up locking himself in his study, and he pulls the blinds. He doesn't want to see anyone. He doesn't want to talk to anyone. He just wants to be left alone. And after a number of days, his wife finally comes into his study, all dressed in mourner's clothing, in black. And he looks up and he says, "Honey, who died?" And she said, "God did." And he responded and said, "What are you talking about? How could God die? God didn't die." And she said, "Well, I thought for sure he did, the way you're acting." So discouraged, so downhearted, feeling so alone, acting as though God doesn't even live. And somehow the light bulb came on. And he thought, you're absolutely correct. God is alive. God is real. And God lives in my heart. And because of that, I can be a happy person. I can be a joyful person. I can have peace in the midst of my storm. And yet I find that so often in life, some of the most discouraged and disgruntled people that I come across sometimes are so-called Christian people. That ought not be. No, I'm not saying we don't have some bad days and we don't feel good and we feel lousy and I realize that sometimes the littlest thing can turn our world upside down, such as a telephone call, an accident, the car don't start. You go to the doctor, you get bad news, or you had a sleepless night and you wake up with aches and pains. I understand that. But that doesn't change the facts that God is still alive and real and wants to meet our needs and wants to take care of us and see us through. Jesus' death for that early church, those disciples, those that knew him, left their lives shattered. It left them without hope and without dreams. Because you have to understand, although he did many miracles for them, and although he tried to teach them, and he tried to tell them and warn them, in their minds they at this point could not grasp what was going on and what was happening. All they knew in their minds was that their Lord, their Savior, their Master, the Son of God, was dead. They were there. They saw him hanging on a cross. They saw him as they took his body off the cross and they took it to the tomb and they put him inside the tomb. They were there. They seen it. They seen as the stone, the big boulder was rolled over the doorway. They watched as the guards were standing by, as the seal of the emperor was placed upon it. They were there. They seen it. They knew that he was dead. And their world was turned upside down and inside out. And they couldn't believe it. How could this be? How could this be? And I can just imagine that Friday night as they watched everything that was transpiring, and as they put him in the tomb and rolled the boulder over the opening, and what were they to do? I imagine when they all got back together again, they just kept shaking their heads. I can't believe it. I just can't believe he's gone. And in their minds, they couldn't grasp what was going on and what was happening. They didn't know what they were going to do. The Word of God says that next day, would have been Saturday, was the Jewish Sabbath. And it says on the Sabbath, they rested. These were some good Jews. They rested. And I imagine they were thankful for that day of rest. Still in shock, still can't believe what had happened, don't know what they're going to do. How could this be? And they started forming in their minds what they were going to do. At least some of the women did anyhow. And they decided that the next day they'd get up early and they'd go get some spices and they'd go back to the tomb and they would finish off the body of Jesus. Finish burying him, putting spices on him and stuff. And so that next day they got up early and they went. They came to the tomb. They came to the tomb with broken hearts. Feelings of still loneliness, confusion, emptiness. And I imagine as they were walking towards the tomb, they kept saying, I just can't believe he's gone. I can't believe he's gone. The second thing was they came to the tomb out of love and servitude. They came because they felt like they needed to finish off burying him, finish his body and to make him smell good and to put these spices among the clothing there, the linens. And they did it out of love, out of great respect for him. But they also did it out of a servant attitude. And then the third thing that really kind of shocked them, they came not expecting a resurrection. You know, when I thought about that, I thought, I wonder how many times we come to church on a Sunday morning not even expecting to hear from Jesus. I got news for you. The God that I serve, the Jesus that I love, is a God, is a Savior that wants to commune with me. He wants to talk to me. He wants to fellowship with me. He wants to teach me. And He's got a lot to teach me, as well as you. These ladies came not realizing that something had happened and something had taken place. And then to add to the confusions, the guards were gone, the seal was broken, the stone was rolled away, the tomb was empty, and Jesus was gone. Now, can you imagine them ladies when they got there? They got there with their pails or their bags or their hands full of spices. And when they got to the tomb, they were shocked. They began to think, well, who's going to roll the boulder away? And what about the guards? And when they got there, it was all gone. It was all taken care of. And then when they looked inside, the body was gone. And that really added to all the mess, the confusion, the questions, the wonderment. Because at this point, they still didn't grasp and understand what was happening and what was going on. Luke records that when the women looked in the tomb, they did not find the body of the Lord. And it's not what the ladies didn't see when they looked in the tomb, but what they did see when they looked in. You know what they seen? They seen angels. They seen angels. And the angel said something very interesting to these ladies. The angel's message said this: "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" Why do you seek the living among the dead? Now, that was a question they couldn't quite answer. They weren't sure about that one. Because you see, at this point, they still didn't quite grasp and understand. They thought they must have took the body. And they asked, "What'd you do with the body?" And the angel's saying, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" And then they say, "He's not here. He has risen. He's not here. He has risen." And at this point, I still don't think they quite grasped and understood. That would be like somebody knocking on your door. Well, it'd probably even be more than that. But it'd be like somebody knocking on your door and saying, "Hey, we got a big check for you right here. You just won the clearinghouse, what is it, publishing, whatever it is, okay? And you're going to receive $5,000 a week for the rest of your life." You'd say, "Huh? What? You got to be kidding." And for some reason, it still wouldn't sink in. And they'd say, "No, really? Here's the check. Look at the balloons." Has anybody ever seen that? I never have. I don't know of anybody that ever has. Don't they ever come to Newcastle? I'd sure wish they would. I wish they'd stop at 130 Greenfield Road too. But I don't think that's going to happen. But anyhow, they still didn't catch it. It still didn't sink in. He's not here. He's risen. And then the angel said something else that I thought was interesting. The angel said, "Remember. Remember what he told you. Remember what he said. He told you while he was still with you in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the third day be raised up." Did you catch that? The angels are saying, don't you remember what he told you? And he told them what he had said. And then it's like, wow. Could it really be? Could it really be? And then he said, go and tell the disciples, and be sure you tell Peter as well. The empty tomb could only mean one thing, and that was, he is alive. He is alive. Mary met Jesus alive from the dead. 2 disciples on the road met Jesus alive from the dead. The apostles met Jesus alive from the dead. Doubting Thomas met Jesus alive from the dead. 500 people at one time met Jesus alive from the dead. The message went out. He's alive. He's alive. He's alive. I mean, wouldn't that be an awesome message for them disciples to hear? I can just imagine as those women got to where Peter was and the other disciples, and they said, you're not going to believe it. The tomb is empty. There was an angel. Actually, one of the Gospels says there were 2 angels in the tomb. They spoke to us. He's not there. He's alive. I can just imagine as that anticipation began to mount up and it began to grow. And they ran to the tomb. They looked inside and lo and behold, it was empty. It was empty. An ancient legend says that in the early church, if a believer was to be martyred for his faith, they would tie his hands as they marched him out to the stake, to tie him to the stake, to burn his body. And before they set the wood on fire, they would ask him if he had anything to say. The response was 3 words. He is alive. And little did the guards know, but many of the Christians in the area would gather around. And in response to his remarks, his last words, he is alive, they would all together shout in one accord, he is alive indeed. And with that, they would light the wood and burn the martyr's body. He is alive. Life has a way of shattering our hopes and dreams. You've got to remember something, and that is that we're not home yet. We're not home yet. I think sometimes we wonder, why doesn't God answer prayer for me? Why do I have to struggle like I do at times? Why can't God just, every time I pray, just meet my need and take care of me? I mean, after all, if He's a God that really loves me and really cares about me, why doesn't He do that for me? And maybe some of you have been praying for years. Maybe you've got a loved one. Maybe you've been praying for your kids or some other relatives that they would come to know Jesus. And it just seems as though the more you pray, the farther away from God it seems they become. And you say, God, why don't you answer prayer? Or God, I've been praying about this job now for a long, long time. It's time you either get me another job or give me a raise or help me do something. And you've been praying and you've been praying. And God doesn't seem to be answering. You may be struggling with your health. Maybe you wake up every day with a bad back and you've got arthritis and you've got aches and pains, and it just seems as though God is just not answering prayer. And you keep praying and you keep asking God, touch my body and bring healing. It's not happening. I want to tell you something. Something that I think so often we lose focus on. And that is simply this, that we're just pilgrims passing through this life. This is not our home. Don't get too comfortable down here because you're not going to be here too long. You're not going to be here too long. And I think we fail to forget heaven is not here. Heaven is with God. So we're just pilgrims passing through. And I think there are times when God says, I'm just, not going to answer prayer for you right now. Maybe he realizes you need to struggle a little bit. You need to deal with this a little bit. You need to have some aches and pains because you're not home yet. And after all, if he answered prayer for us every time we prayed, if we didn't have a care in the world, how much would we long for heaven? But you see, we long for heaven because we're tired of our aches and pains. We're tired of our sorrows. We're tired of all the problems and the frustrations of life at times. And these bodies wear out. So don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. All things work together for good to them that love God. And after all, Paul prayed 3 times. And God responded, and many times this is how God will respond to us. My grace is sufficient. Just rest in the grace of God. In the darkest of moments is when Jesus shines the brightest. In your darkest of moments is when Jesus will shine the brightest. Serve God when we don't understand what's happening. These women that went to care for the body of Jesus, they certainly didn't understand what was going on and what was happening. And in their last show of duty and love and servitude, they wanted to finish the preparation of his dead body. When I was thinking about that, I thought, we need to be careful as servants of God that we don't quit and we don't give up. God calls all of us to minister. All of us to minister. Now, not everybody can stand behind a desk and a pulpit, and not everybody can hold a mic and sing. Not everybody can get at the piano and play. But there is something that you can do. Because God has called each and every one of us to minister in one way or one form. Somebody may come to you and have a particular need. And to be able to say to them, hey, let me just have a quick word of prayer with you. What a way to minister. Or to say to them, when they shared their problems with you, say, hey, I believe in God and I believe that God answers prayer and I just want to offer a prayer for you if I can. And most people will be grateful for that. You just say a quick, short prayer. You say, oh, Pastor, I can't begin to pray for someone. I get all nervous and I don't know what to say and that don't matter. Just talk to God like you'd talk to anyone. Talk to God. There is a surprise that awaits us if we keep true and faithful. John records that something that I think is really cool. In the Gospel of John, there's an account there that tells us about the tomb, and when the Marys got there, the disciples got there, that they noticed his bed clothing that was laying there, the burial clothing that he was in was laying there. But John takes the time to tell us that there was a folded napkin. That there was a folded napkin. And I love this story. You see, the tradition was back in those days that when you went and had a meal, that you took the napkin that you used to wipe your hands off with and your mouth off with, and when you were done, you took the napkin and you laid it on the table. And you got up and you were done. If you were interrupted during your meal and you were not done, what the head of the table would do, the master of the house would do, he would take the napkin, he would fold it and place it by his plate or his bowl or his dish. And the servants knew that, hey, he's not done, he's coming back, because the napkin was folded. If he wasn't coming back, he'd just take the napkin and throw it on the table, and the servants would know he's done. I think when they got to the tomb and they looked, and John tells us there was the folded napkin. And I think it was a message to say, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. That's our hope. That's our hope. He is coming back. My last point is simply this. The angel told Mary, remember what he told to you. Remember what he said. God gave us his word so that we would remember what he said. This book is full of truth, God's truth. All of it, God's truth. And it's for us to remember. It's here. You've got a problem? Go to the Word. If there's something you don't understand, go to the Word. If your life is turned upside down, go to the Word. If you need hope, go to the Word. If you need comfort, go to the Word. If you need peace in the midst of your crisis, go to the Word. The Word of God has everything that you have need of. That's why we call it the bread of life. Remember what's in this book. That's why it's so important that we read it. Read the Word. Hey, the good news, the tomb is still empty. Christ lives today. He lives. Nina has been struggling with her voice all week. Lost it early last week, I guess it was, or late last week, whenever it was. But she's going to come and she's going to try to sing one of my favorite songs that she sings. And it's not Easter if Nina doesn't get to sing this song. So, or it's not Easter if I don't get to hear this song. So she's going to come and hopefully she'll be able to get through this song.
This song is about Peter. If you remember in the Word where it says, prior to all these things happening, before they even took Christ, Peter said, I will die for you. But yet, when things got tough, Peter denied his Lord 3 times. Not once, not twice, 3 times. And this is what may have been going on in Peter's mind after the crucifixion. He is alive this morning. The gates and doors were barred and all the windows fastened down. I spent the night in sleeplessness and rose at every sound. half in hopeless sorrow and half in fear the day would find the soldiers breaking through to drag us all away. Just before the sunrise, I heard something at the wall. The gate began to rattle and a voice began to call. I hurried to the window and looked down into the street, expecting swords and torches and the sound of soldiers' feet. There was no one there but Mary, so I went down to let her in. John stood there beside me as she told us where she'd been. She said they've moved him in the night and none of us knows where. The stone's been rolled away and now his body isn't there. We both ran toward the garden and John ran on ahead. We found that stone and the empty tomb just the way that Mary said. And the winding sheet they wrapped him in was just an empty shell. How or where they'd taken him was more than I could tell. Well, something strange had happened there, but just what I didn't know. John believed a miracle, but I just turned to go. Circumstance and speculation couldn't lift me very high, 'cause I'd seen them crucify him, then I saw him die. Back inside the house again, the guilt and anguish came. Everything I promised him just added to my shame. When at last it came to choices, I denied I knew his name. And even if he was alive, it wouldn't be the same. But suddenly the air was filled with a strange and sweet perfume. Light that shone from everywhere drove shadows from the room. Jesus stood before me with his arms out open wide, and I fell down on my knees and I just clung to him and cried. He raised me to my feet, and as I looked into his eyes, love was shining out from him like sunlight from the skies. Guilt and my confusion disappeared in sweet release. Every fear I ever had just melted into peace.